Before the moon reached its zenith, Starfire picked her way along a narrow forest trail, hooves sinking into the soft carpet of pine needles that carpeted the understory. The night was unnaturally still, no cricket song, no rustle of small mammals in the underbrush, until a single plaintive whimper drifted on the cool air, sharp as a shard of glass. Starfire's ears pricked, her nostrils flared as she willed her heart to slow, seeking the source of the sound that trembled through the pines. Slipping past gnarled trunks and fallen logs, slick with moss, Starfire followed the fragile cry deeper into the forest's embrace. Each careful hooffall disturbed a swirl of silver moonlight on the ferns, and axles of shadow stretched beneath the towering Douglas firs. As she rounded a bend, the whimper grew before her, a broken, urgent appeal that stoked the mare's protective instinct. A chill breeze rustled the branches overhead, and somewhere in the darkness, an owl called in soft reply. In a small clearing ringed by ancient stones and half-buried roots, Starfire came upon the source, a gray and white wolf pup, no larger than a foal's head, curled against a mossy stump. Its leg lay twisted at an unnatural angle, fur matted with blood and damp earth. Starfire's breath caught at the sight, nostrils flaring at the raw scent of fear and pain. Yet the pup's eyes, bright slits of moonlight, met hers with a flicker of recognition. No longer prey or stranger, but a soul in need. Starfire lowered her head in a gentle nicker, the sound rolling through the clearing like a promise. The pup's whimper softened, hope stirring in its trembling flank. The mare shuffled closer, nostrils brushing the coarse fur of the injured animal, and pressed her broad chest between the pup and the dark expanse beyond. Above them, the moon wheeled slow and sure, painting the scene in silver that glinted off the pup's wet muzzle and Starfire's midnight mane. In that hushed moment, beneath the watching trees, the Mustang's vigil began, a night's watch that would carry them both toward an unforgettable dawn. Starfire's muscles rippled beneath her jet-black coat as she knelt beside the wounded pup, nostrils quivering to catch its faint, ragged breaths. The forest around them pressed close, towering pines and ancient cedars whose trunks loomed like silent sentinels under the pale moonlight. From somewhere deeper in the woods came the soft rustle of unseen creatures stirring in the underbrush. But in this small clearing, there was only the pulse of life in the pup's trembling whimper. The pup's leg was bent at a cruel angle, the flesh torn and slick with blood that still gleamed like garnet in the lantern glow of fireflies caught between the ferns. Starfire's heart tightened at the sight, and she lowered her muzzle to nuzzle the pup's neck, sending a warmth into its shivering body. The wolf's eyes, large pools of pain and disbelief, blinked up at her as though asking, "Why me?" Starfire responded with a soft, reassuring nicker that rolled through the air like a soothing hymn. Steeling herself for the task ahead, Starfire rose and stepped back to survey the clearing. Moonlight filtered through the branches, casting shifting patterns on the mossy floor. There, half buried in damp earth, lay fragments of a broken tree limb, perhaps the very object that had fallen and crushed the pup's leg. Starfire pawed at the ground, dislodging brittle bark and moss until she uncovered the jagged splinter embedded in the wound. Each breath the pup took was shallow, its ribs rising and falling in a fragile rhythm. But Starfire steeled her resolve. Carefully, with gentleness born of fierce compassion, she lowered her head and nudged the pup aside just enough to reach the worst of the debris. Her teeth, broad and blunt, closed around the splinter's thicker end. With a single measured pull, she extracted it from the pup's leg. The pup yelped, a raw, startled cry that echoed through the trees, but Starfire stayed close, pressing her warm muzzle to the wound's edge as if to offer both comfort and protection. Blood welled once more, but Starfire did not flinch. Instead, she turned to a cluster of ferns and yanked free a handful of their broad fronds. She pressed the cool, leafy green against the injured limb, letting the fern's moisture wash away the worst of the blood and dirt. The pup's whines softened into quiet pants, and its eyes, still wide, tracked Starfire's movements with a mixture of trust and pain. Above them, An owl's wings sliced the sky in silent arc, a reminder that predators might circle in the dark. Starfire responded with a low snort, stamping her forehoof twice to warn any curious watcher that this clearing was claimed. The pup, once a victim of cruel fate, nuzzled closer, pressing its small body against Starfire's shoulder for safety. In return, Starfire lay down to shelter the pup beneath her broad chest, hooves tucked like sentinels on either side. For the rest of the night, they remained in that stance. Starfire's stillness, a fortress against the forest's unseen dangers, and the pup's soft breathing a fragile melody in the hush of midnight. Each rustle of fallen leaves, each sigh of wind through the pines, remained outside her circle of protection. And as the moon traced its arc across the sky, Starfire's vigil never faltered. Every heartbeat, every breath, a testament to the bond forming between Mustang and wolf, forged in the darkness where only compassion shone. With true lig, Starfire rose to her feet as dawn's pale promise grayed the sky, hooves silent on the soft moss beneath towering pines. The wounded pup pressed close against her shoulder, still trembling from the night's pain, but its breathing had steadied under the warmth of her flank. Starfire's dark eyes reflected steely resolve. She knew the clearing was safe only until dawn brushed the forest in light. If predators roamed beyond her vigil, she must move the pup to the den where its mother, if she yet lived, might find them. With the pup gently cushioned against her broad withers, Starfire pivoted and slipped into the deeper woods, each hooffall muffled by pine needles and fallen leaves. The thicket closed in around them. Gnarled roots snaked across the ground, brambles snagged at her fetlocks, and low-hanging branches brushed against her sleek mane. Yet she carried on, every sinew attuned to the pup's fragile weight, and every sense alert for the slightest rustle of other life. Moonlight still lingered on moss-covered stones, guiding her through the labyrinth of trunks and shadowed clearings. Twice she hesitated at hidden hollows, caverns carved by roots and rain, and once she skirted a snake's coiled form, tense beneath a slab of bark. Each time, Starfire stamped her hoof with calm authority, her breath rising in misty clouds that drifted through the shafts of light. The pup whimpered softly, and Starfire nickered reassurance, urging it onward toward the den she had glimpsed in her first frantic search. A shallow hollow under the entwined roots of an old oak, its mouth half hidden by ferns. As the forest floor sloped downward, Starfire's pace quickened into a silent gallop, hooves barely stirring the ground as she threaded between leaning pines. The pup clung to her, fur brushing the stallion's flank in a quiet heartbeat of trust. Mist-swollen air clung to their coats, and distant owls hushed in their roosts as Starfire flew through the midnight woods, a streak of jet against the silvered trunks. At last, she reached the oak's roots. Gnarled limbs formed a natural cradle just large enough to shelter the pup. Starfire halted with a soft exhalation, nostrils flaring as she shook the last of the nighttime chill from her coat. She knelt, creating a ramp with her broad chest, and the pup scrambled down in one trembling leap. Starfire then nosed aside damp ferns to reveal the hollow's soft bed of pine needles, pressing them into place until the den looked as though it had been prepared for this very moment. With the pup nestled safely, Starfire backed away a few paces, flattening her ears in cautious recall of every shadow-lurking threat. She lifted her head and tested the wind with a single nostril twitch, rabbit's musk, damp earth, and no hint of larger predators. Satisfied, she lowered herself beside the den's entrance, flanks heaving with exertion, and dipped her muzzle to nuzzle the pup in quiet protection. Behind her, the forest exhaled as dawn's light filtered through the canopy, touching moss and bark with pale gold. Starfire's vigil shifted from urgent flight to steadfast guard. She stood watch at the hollow's mouth, ears swiveling at every forest murmur, determined that no darkness, no matter how deep, would come between this pup and the safety she had carved out beneath the ancient oak. As the first shafts of dawn pierced the dense canopy, casting latticed patterns of light and shadow across the forest floor, Starfire's ears twitched at a distant rustle, an unnerving crack of twig that shattered the fragile calm. She rose to her full height, muscles taut beneath her midnight coat, flank still warm against the pup's side. The wolf kit, eyes wide with trust and lingering fear, pressed closer, pressing its small form into the mare's flank as though seeking an unspoken vow of protection. From the undergrowth ahead, slithered shapes, four tawny bodies with black-tipped tails and cunning amber eyes. A pack of coyotes drawn by the scent of blood and the promise of an easy meal, advanced in cautious lines, noses low, baying softly and greeting to one another. Starfire's nostrils flared at their musky odor. Her muscles coiled like springs. With a defiant snort that echoed through the pines, she planted her front hooves and stomped twice, sending a shock of sound through the clearing. The coyotes froze, hackles raised, sizing this lone Mustang stallion, and the small wolf pup sheltered at her side. One bold coyote stepped forward, jaws parting in a low, menacing growl as it edged closer to the den's entrance. Starfire pinned her ears and reared, hooves flashing in fierce arcs that carved clouds of dust from the pine-needled earth. The coyote yelped and stumbled back, only to find its flank met by the thunderous advance of Starfire's forelegs. A second coyote lunged, teeth bared, but Starfire pivoted with balletic precision, delivering a well-placed kick that sent the attacker sprawling into a tangle of ferns. Behind her, Starfire could hear the pup's soft whimper, and her resolve hardened like iron. She spun, hooves striking sparks from pine bark as she placed her broad chest between the den and any further threat. The surviving coyotes circled, eyes gleaming with hunger, but each time they tested her barrier, Starfire answered with a snort and a rearing stomp, her mane a midnight banner unfurled in defiance. At the height of the clash, when claws scraped at bark and teeth snapped inches from the stallion's flank, a low, commanding growl rolled through the underbrush. From the shadows emerged a second wolf, larger and grayer, muzzle flecked with white. The alpha, likely the pup's mother, stood at the edge of the clearing, eyes blazing. The coyotes hesitated, caught between the imposing Mustang and the returning sovereign of the pack. With a final snarl, the alpha stepped forward, and a tense standoff froze all five predators under the burgeoning daylight. Starfire's chest heaved, each breath a puff of mist in the cooling air. She dipped her head to the pup in a gesture of reassurance before meeting the alpha's gaze. In that moment, an unspoken truce formed. The pup was safe under Starfire's watch, and the forest's order, predator and protector, wild and wilder, was restored. The coyotes slunk away, retreating into the shadows they had emerged from, leaving mare and wolf reunited beneath the ancient pines. As the alpha gathered the pup with a tender muzzle nuzzle, Starfire lowered her head in a humble nod, then turned and slipped back into the deeper woods. Her vigil remained unbroken, though the immediate danger had passed. She would stand guard at the hollow's mouth until the sun climbed high and the forest's pulse found its gentle rhythm once more. By the time the forest's edge softened into the gold of late morning, Starfire had settled into a tense vigilance that refused the luxury of rest. The wolf pup, its leg bandaged with strips of willow bark, nestled at her feet, ears flicking at every rustle beyond the hollow's threshold. The alpha had retreated into the deeper woods with her mate, leaving Starfire alone in her watch, a mare whose midnight coat gleamed beneath dapples of sunlight that danced through the canopy. Starfire dipped her muzzle to the pup's trembling shoulder, inhaling the warm, earthy scent of its fur and the tang of Willow's healing sap. The kit lifted its muzzle in thanks, its whiskers brushing against Starfire's muzzle in a gesture of trust that anchored the mare's resolve. With a gentle nicker, Starfire nudged the pup closer to the hollow's mossy floor, where soft ferns formed a cradle of living green. Hours passed in measured heartbeats. Starfire stood sentinel at the den's entrance, muscles coiled and every sense attuned to the forest's subtle symphony. The distant drip of unseen springs, the soft susurrus of leaves stirred by a light breeze, the far-off cry of a hawk riding the rising thermals. Each sound was a note in the score she could not afford to miss. The pup, though safe, quivered at the slightest shift of shadow and Starfire responded with a reassuring stamp of her forehoof, an echo of protection that reverberated through the clearing. As the sun rose to its zenith, the forest's warmth coaxed hidden threats from their lairs. A snake's silent slide across sun-warmed stones, a raccoon's furtive scuttle among discarded pine cones. Each time, Starfire's ears pricked, and she snorted a low warning, hooves shifting to brace against any approach. The pup cowered but never fled, its faith in Starfire, an unspoken covenant born in the crucible of danger. When afternoon gave way to the rose-tinted glow of dusk, Starfire's vigil deepened into a starlit watch. Fireflies emerged among the ferns, their tiny lanterns blinking in rhythm with the mare's steady breathing. The pup's eyelids drooped in exhaustion, and Starfire lowered her head to allow it to curl against her flank. Yet she remained upright, every muscle taut as though mid-battle, hooves planted firmly on the moss, to anchor her charge against any nighttime menace. Hours later, as the moon carved silver paths through the trees, Starfire sensed the return of the alpha and her mate. The pup stirred, lifting its head at the sound of soft, familiar nuzzles. Starfire exhaled a breath she didn't realize she'd held, lowering her head in a final gesture of guardianship. The alpha pressed close to her pup, eyes dark with gratitude and respect. Starfire dipped her muzzle in solemn greeting, and then, as dawn's first glow crept once more beneath the pines, she stepped away. Her duty fulfilled, but her spirit forever bound to the memory of that night's unwavering watch. In the clearing's hush, where once there lay only prey and predator, now stood a testament to compassion. A wild Mustang mare, whose lonely heartbeat guarded the fragile life of a fallen wolf pup, forging a peace beneath the stars that would echo through the forest's ancient song for seasons yet to come. As the first tendrils of dawn brushed the horizon with pale rose and lavender, Starfire remained unmoving at the hollow's mouth, her breath misting in the chill air. The forest around her softened from inky black to deep indigo, and the first owl's calls gave way to the trill of waking songbirds. Beneath her, the wolf pup stirred, lifting its head on unsteady legs. Its eyes, once clouded with fear, reflected the dawn's promise as they blinked open, following the mare's midnight mane into the light. Starfire dipped her muzzle to the pup's side in a gentle greeting, and the pup responded with a tentative nicker, a sound borrowed from the herd that trembled on the morning breeze. The pup's wounds had crusted overnight. The willow bark bandages held firm, and with each careful movement, its limp grew less pronounced. Starfire stepped back, hooves sinking into the soft earth, and with soft stamps, she beckoned the pup to test its strength. Cautiously, the kit rose on all four paws, each hoof finding firmer purchase than the night before. It shook its head once, silver-frosted fur catching the new light, and took a tentative step forward. Starfire responded with a low nicker of encouragement, her dark eyes warm with pride. The pup's next step found more confidence, and soon it was pacing in small circles, tail lifting in wonder as dawn spilled pink across the tree trunks. Beyond the clearing, the herd's mares emerged at the forest's edge, drawn by Starfire's call to accompany her home. They stood in a ragged line of russet and dappled gray, heads low in greeting to Starfire's lone vigil. Recognizing their stallion's return, the herd's leader let out a triumphant whinny that rolled across the pines, and the Mustangs gathered in celebration of the new life revived beneath the rosy sky. Starfire turned to the pup and offered her shoulder as a step, guiding the kit toward the herd. With a hesitant leap, the pup scrambled upon the mare's flank, bracing itself against her sleek coat. Starfire then trotted forward, careful and slow, carrying the pup through the forest's edge and into the rising sun. The mare's hooves rang against the soft dirt road that led back to the open meadow, each hoofbeat a heartbeat of hope. As they emerged from the trees, the pup climbed down and trotted in short, spirited bounds alongside Starfire, following the herd into the open grass. The golden dawn bathed the prairie in gentle light, and the pup galloped with newfound joy, chasing Copper and Ember in a dance of youthful abandon. Starfire brought up the rear, mane rippling in the sun, flanks still bearing the pup's weight when needed, but now empty of bandages and fear. In that breathtaking moment, when night's trials yielded to dawn's gentle promise, the pup paused and lifted its muzzle to the rising sun, letting out a clear, hopeful howl that carried across the valley. The Mustangs answered in kind, whinnies and nickers intertwining with the pup's call to create a chorus of life reborn. Starfire stood tall among her herd, every vein in her flanks singing with triumph, as together they celebrated the pup's first breath of hope under the pink sky, a dawn forever etched in the memory of forest and plain alike. By midday, the prairie mingled gold and green beneath the unwavering sun, and Starfire's herd had gathered at the edge of the forest to bid farewell to their unexpected charge. The wolf pup, whose wounds had healed beneath the mare's protective watch, now bounded through the tall grasses with lithe grace, its silver-frosted coat gleaming in the bright light. Copper and Ember, the colt and filly, who had befriended Bramble the fox kid in earlier adventures, galloped alongside the pup in a joyous procession. Their young laughter, whinnies and chirps, blending with the prairie wind's soft murmur. Starfire stood at the center of this living tapestry, muscles rippling beneath her midnight hide as she watched the pup pause at the herd's edge. The kit turned its bright amber eyes upon her, nostrils flaring in a silent question. Starfire dipped her head in solemn nod, her dark gaze suffused with pride and affection. With a final, soft nicker, a benediction more profound than any spoken word, she relinquished her guardianship. The pup emitted a clear, high-pitched trill of farewell and, with lithe bounds, slipped away into the grass, its form a fading shadow beneath the swaying seed heads. Copper and Ember galloped after for a playful escort, keeping pace until Bramble slowed at the fringe, where prairie met timberline. There, beneath a solitary cottonwood whose branches arched like welcoming arms, the kit paused, ears pricked and tail waving in farewell. Starfire approached, hooves ringing softly on the warmed earth, and nudged the pup's flank with her muzzle, a final gesture of unwavering protection. The pup returned the touch, pressing its soft muzzle against the mare's chest in a moment of shared trust. Around them, the herd formed a solemn circle. Mares nodded in respectful blessing, stallions dipped their heads in tribute to her courage, and foals pressed close, wide-eyed witnesses to a bond that transcended the boundaries of species. As the cottonwood's leaves trembled overhead, stirred by a gentle breeze, the pup lifted its head for one last, echoing howl that soared across the prairie like a promise. Starfire answered with a resounding whinny, a clarion call that carried through the grasses and beyond the distant ridges. In that moment, mare and pup celebrated not an ending, but the enduring beginning of a friendship forged in courage, compassion, and wild solidarity. Then, as the pup melted into the embrace of the timberline, its silhouette swallowed by shrub and shadow, Starfire turned to her herd. Together they trotted homeward, a wave of midnight and moonlight traversing the sunlit plains, and though the forest now held only whispering echoes of hoofbeats and the faintest traces of silver fur, every heart beneath the boundless sky carried the memory of that night's vigil, a testament to a Mustang's fearless devotion and a wolf pup's promise to carry her legacy into the wilds beyond.